We get on average around 81 boats a month delivering fuel to Australia. We're aware of 6 boats that have been cancelled out of that 81 on average, and some of those have already been replaced by the importers and refiners with other sources. So that gives us, I think, some context to what we're dealing with. That's not to say that, it isn't a very challenged environment internationally, and of course the flow of oil to Asian refineries has slowed, and that has downward impacts on us. But also, I think Australians can take the context that while we are dealing with that uncertainty, we still have 2 refineries working full pelt. Would be better if we'd had more, sure, but we do have 2. And we also have the boats continuing to arrive, and the refiners and importers working very closely with government to replace those 6 at this point that have been cancelled or deferred with other suppliers, and that is occurring.
Are you worried that more than 6 will be cancelled from mid-April?
Well, I've always been clear, we're in an uncertain environment, so that's why have done and are doing all the preparatory work, as I indicated during the week. But nevertheless, I do think that sort of 6 out of 80 does give us, at this point, some of the context of what we're dealing with. It's not without challenges, but also I don't want people to think, and I can understand, in the debate, people think, well, all the ships are coming now and one day they'll all stop.
Well, as the effects of this war reverberate right across the globe, our Federal Energy Minister insists Australia's fuel and diesel supplies remain secure and are arriving as scheduled. Though disruptions are being felt right across the supply chain, the government is insisting panic buying is not necessary. Sarah Navin has more.
Georgie, the Energy Minister will today meet with peak.
Each of the major fuel companies are obliged to hold a minimum amount of diesel and petrol in their stocks at any one time. The Albanese government is lowering the collective amount importers and refiners of fuel need to hold. Diesel will be reduced from 2.7 billion litres to 2.2 billion, and for petrol.
Earlier today, Angus Taylor said that fuel coming from our refineries should remain in Australia. Australian fuel working for Australians is the phrase he used. What's your response to that?
I'm surprised that a former energy minister could make such a fundamental error. Viva doesn't export, and Ampol's only exports are that fuel which did not meet our environmental standards until I made that change last week, which they will now move to change. So Angus Taylor, unfortunately, has chosen to use this international crisis as a political opportunity. It would have been better if he just get better acquainted with the facts and not make things up. He is playing politics and he's getting basic facts wrong.
Earlier today, Angus.
The Prime Minister is calling a second national cabinet on the fuel crisis next week, calling for national consistency as bowsers across the country run dry. Meantime, some states are going it alone. New South Wales is setting up a fuel crisis centre in Sydney's west, expected to be working today.
What we're seeing is the lumpy distribution of fuel in the economy today. We want to make sure that all sectors of the state and all parts of the economy have access to it.
Premier Minns warned things will get worse before they get better, pushing for the agencies to focus on shortages.
There are really 3 problems. I'll be very brief, but there are 3 big problems with this gas reservation, which is a reheated microwave Morrison policy. They've taken a Morrison policy and reheated it in the microwave. That's problem number 1. The gas-fired recovery was announced by Angus Taylor in 2020. The day that he did that, gas prices were $4 a gigajoule. By the time of the election, they were $34.70. Well done, Angus. That's the carbon copy of what they're doing today. It's exactly the same word for word. It didn't work then. It won't work now. Secondly, briefly, they say 100 petajoules is the answer. Well, we've introduced 640 through our gas code of conduct.
Well, I just got thrown out of question time again.
It is true, of course, that in rural and regional Australia, people are finding it difficult to get diesel in particular, Mr Speaker, and there are many instances of that, Mr Speaker, and it's a very serious matter and it should be dealt with.
Pause. I don't know why the member for Fisher thinks he's the only person who can be continually interjecting. Definitely now will be leaving the chamber.
Why? Because I had the temerity to ask Chris Bowen why Mooloolaba Wharf had run short on fuel.
We'll continue to work to ensure that we have the fuel that we need, protecting families.
Last week, Chris Bowen, as our Energy Minister, assured Australians that there were 34 days of diesel in this country.
The answer to the question is 34 days in relation to diesel.
9 days into a conflict, I've now got fishermen on the wharf who are ringing me, telling me that they are out of fuel. Zip, nothing nothing available. The only diesel they've got is in the tanks. If fishermen can't go out to fish, they can't catch anything. Therefore, they don't earn any money. Therefore, they've got to lay staff off. This is utterly unacceptable. This government has been caught napping in relation to fuel security for Australians. This is the same bloke who assured us that we would get a $275 price reduction in our electricity bills. How did that work? So when he tells us that there are 34 days of fuel and we can't get fuel, or some industries can't get diesel, guess what? Australians have got a right to be angry.
The former government promised a gas-fired recovery and left us a gas bin fire for the new government to deal with. I don't hold the former government accountable for any particular element of the crises we are facing, the very serious situation we are facing. I do say this though, the former government's 9 years of denial and delay, their 23 energy policies, their ad hocery, their changes of policy approaches have left Australia ill-prepared.
How much higher are bills going to go?
Look, I think it's a little, frankly, too early. Clearly the energy market is straining under enormous pressure. Now, at the moment, this is impacting on wholesale prices. In the gas market, thankfully, around 80% of gas contracts are done over the longer term. So it's not yet, in that regard, impacting on retail prices in a way which it could be a lot worse.
So, we've heard a lot about soaring fuel prices and potential shortages from the conflict in the Middle East. It's a lot of information to digest. So, we've sifted through it all, and here's everything you need to know about Australia's fuel supply. We've got enough fuel for now, but there are big questions about our fuel security in the coming months. And that's because Australia imports 90% of the fuel we use. Most of it comes from Asia, with South Korea, Singapore and India our biggest suppliers of refined fuels. That's things like petrol, diesel and jet fuel. Most of what we call crude oil, that's still refined in Australia, comes from Malaysia and Brunei. But those countries have their own demands. China and South Korea have already started curbing the export of refined fuel products to keep more for their own citizens. And Malaysia says it might as well.
It's so-called energy nationalism, I guess, and that just makes the whole thing more uneven, right? So it favours people who can produce their own fuels, and it unfortunately...
Diesel is at $3.14.
$2.65 for 98.
We're driving past.
We are driving past.
We're not going in. At least not in this car today.
No, not today.
While petrol drivers are pulling in, EV drivers are passing by.
Whether it's a full EV or a plug-in hybrid, you can basically...
Australia has just 36 days worth of petrol. We should have 90, and most countries do, making them ready for supply shocks like wars. And it could mean Aussies will be paying more at the pump.
How much diesel in days do we currently have in store on Australian soil?
The answer to the question is 34 days in relation to diesel, 32 days in relation to jet fuel, and 36 days in relation to petrol.
That was on Monday, the government confirming we're not ready for a major shock to the oil market. We're pretty dependent on imported fuel to keep the country running. That's just not filling up your car, but also things like keeping ambulances running and refrigerating groceries. The International Energy Agency, which Australia is a member of, says countries need to keep 90 days worth of fuel stocks in case supplies are cut off, to be ready to collectively respond to severe supply disruptions affecting the global oil market.
What we're dealing with is a very big increase in demand, which is understandable with what people are watching on television.
The PM's department has asked for Treasury modelling on a new windfall tax for gas giants to call back some profits for Australians. Do you think that's a good idea?
I'll make just a few brief points. Firstly, the budget is delivered in May, not in March. And thirdly, I don't comment on cabinet processes.
Is it something that you can rule out?
It's something that I won't comment on cabinet processes.
Do you see any merit to it though?
Third time, I don't comment on cabinet processes.
Is it worth looking into a levy though on gas companies given the circumstances?
The budget is delivered in May and not March. I won't be commenting on cabinet processes.
What would convince the government that it's a good idea?
The budget will be delivered in May, and I won't be commenting on cabinet processes today, tomorrow, or any time before budget day, and the budget will be delivered by the Treasurer, not by the Energy Minister. Any other questions?
Could the government ration how much we fill up?
Well, they've done it before.
In the 1970s, people with odd-numbered licence plates could fill up on one day, and even-numbered licence plates on the other, and back and forth it went for weeks. This was during the second oil crisis of the 1970s, which followed the Iranian Revolution, but technically the trigger was a workers' strike, not the global energy crisis. But forgetting the history lesson, why is this relevant now? This is a simplified graph of where we get our fuel. It's refined in all these Asian countries who...
G'day, Bushy here. Now, we've got a fuel crisis on our hands, and there's no doubt a blocked hummus is going to hurt. But how much is it going to hurt? Is it going to be like Sam Smith hurt, or is it going to be a bit gently? We're Australians. We can rally together. So here are my suggested tips on how we can ration out our fuel. First of all, only take out one jet ski this weekend. Secondly, if you want to go boating, well, tow your tinny on a bike, like this dude. I mean, let's face it, the fish aren't going to catch themselves. And this Saturday night, limit your donuts to only one per bogan. If you're having an affair, choose the girlfriend or the missus, just not two in one day. Turn your engine off in the McDonald's queue. Angles, Marnie Gomez. And don't do what that fuckwit's doing. And if you need to go to the gym for leg day, maybe use your legs and run there. Need to go to Bunnings? Take your e-bike or your electric scooter, because the government just told our kids they can't get on them. Limit your Uber Eats to only one delivery per day. And as for the Jehovah's Witnesses, well, you walk everywhere anyway, so as you were.
Today, after careful consideration, we are adjusting the minimum stock obligation for diesel and fuel to enable companies to better handle and better manage their supply chain more flexibly as they try and get more fuel to regional Australia. The minimum stock obligation, which was introduced by the Albanese government in 2023 for this purpose, for, if you like, the rainy day, is now necessary. And so we have decided, on my recommendation, to reduce the minimum stock obligation for diesel from 2.7 billion litres to 2.2 billion litres, and for petrol from 1 billion litres to 700 million litres.
Federal Energy Minister Chris Bowen has launched a comprehensive review into Australia's gas market regulations to prioritise domestic gas supply. Mr Bowen says any new gas projects cannot only focus on export needs, and that gas needs to be supplied to locals at a reasonable price. The review will also look at simplifying the complex rules that govern the gas industry.
Opinion poll after opinion poll matches what I'm told every day on the street. The most popular form of energy is renewables, as well as being the cheapest form of energy. The most popular form of energy.
When building fuel reserves for Australia, you'd think you'd put them in Australia, but that's not what Angus Taylor did back in March 2020 when he was the Energy Minister.
We have our own reserves in Australia. Angus Taylor kept our reserves in Texas. We keep ours in Geelong and Brisbane.
7 News political podcast The Issue has spoken with the new opposition leader and asked him why he made that controversial call.
I saved the final 2 refineries in this country, and Chris Bowen decided that one of them should export all of their fuel. These are initiatives I put in place, and I got as much fuel as I could stocked for Australia at a time when we had no storage in this country. And I will continue to fight to make sure we have the fuel security we need as a country.
The coalition leader also says we should now drill for our own oil in Australia.
Cries of drill, baby, drill are ringing out as Australia sits on more than 40 years' worth of oil reserves, while a crushing reliance on imports has plunged the nation into a fuel crisis. A report from the US Energy Information Administration identified 6 basins across Australia holding an estimated 400 billion barrels of shale oil. Given Australia consumes about 1.15 million barrels a day, that represents enough fuel to theoretically last the country 42 years.
Well, we spoke about Chris Bowen, the Federal Energy Minister, at the start of the week. On Tuesday, he said there is no fuel crisis. It's just naughty people who are panic buying. Don't do it. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. He said Australia was in a fuel-secure state. Well, overnight he's realised there is a fuel crisis. And amongst other things, he's agreed to import something like 100 million litres of so-called dirty petrol. So
Australia entered the Iran crisis the weakest position in the world.
because we had the highest inflation amongst major advanced economies and rising. The problem with Labor's mismanagement of our economy, the problem with Jim Chalmers' record spending, a 40-year high as a proportion of the economy outside the pandemic, is that it was pushing inflation up even before the crisis.
James, I can't tell you the number of people who have texted me, sent me messages over the weekend, all across the country. They're anxious and they're angry.
Me too, Carl, and frankly they're frustrated with their government who...
As petrol stations across regional Australia struggle to keep diesel stocked, truck drivers are driving blind. Speaking to Yahoo Finance, trucker Robert Cook revealed he was left stranded along South Australia's Dukes Highway, waiting for fuel supplies to turn up to a service station. In a video, Rob showed multiple other trucks waiting for fuel at a service station that had completely run out of diesel.
Australia only has 30 days of fuel, is a phrase you may have heard in the past week or two. The US and Israel's war with Iran has plunged the global oil market into chaos by closing the vital Strait of Hormuz, a waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil supply. So are we only 30 days away from running dry?
Last week in Parliament, Chris Bowen spruiked that under Anthony Albanese's Labor government, there's never been greater liquid fuel supplies, never been greater liquid fuel stocks in petrol and diesel.
The answer to the question is 34 days in relation to diesel, 32 days in relation.
So on Friday, Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan announced a halving of the fuel excise to try and ease the pressure on Australian families and businesses. And that's great, because what it's going to do is, if the Labor government match it, it'll reduce our fuel costs by about 26 cents a litre whilst the war's going on in Iran. But I wanted to share something else with you which I thought was really important. Last week I listened in Parliament whilst a federal Labor MP was talking about how terrible it was that people were filling up jerry cans. And I just thought to myself, that really demonstrates how little people in the Labor Party actually understand what it's like to live in the bush. How the hell do they think, does Labor think that people work in the rural and regional Australia? Do they seriously think that they're going to drive tractors into town and fill them up each time they need fuel? Of course they don't. Tradies don't, they rely on filling up jerry cans for their petrol-driven and diesel-driven equipment. But I just thought it was really fascinating to see how little Labor Party MPs, city MPs, have got no idea of how people work and live in rural and regional Australia. So anyway, a good outcome from our perspective in the announcement by Angus, and let's hope that Albo matches it.
Hello, James speaking.
Oh, yeah, g'day, mate. Sorry, my name's Tim.
This clip from 2013 is still one of my favorite farming clips of all time. This guy, Eric Howard of Weld County, Colorado, got the call that his neighbor's crops were burning. Without hesitation, he hops in his tractor and goes to help stop the fire as much as he can to contain it. Local hero.